The Rich Report, bringing you the richest content across entertainment. My name is Cameron Richardson, and joining me as always is Sean Clark. And joining us today, Brenden Martin, sports editor of the Lumberjack, and Evan McNelia, who's currently interning for the Arizona Daily Sun. Is that correct? Why don't you talk about that a little bit, Evan?
Yeah, this semester I've been lucky enough to get the opportunity to write for the Arizona Daily Sun, covering local Flagstaff sports. So I have two articles up on there right now. One from last Saturday covering Flagstaff's Tyrone Johnson's 325th career win, and from last Tuesday, Flagstaff Basis girls basketball game recap. So if you want to check either of those up, go check out the Arizona Daily Sun.
Brenden and Sean, how are we doing today?
We're doing well,
I am extremely excited for Super Wildcard Weekend. We don't just have 4 games, but we have 6 games. I could not be more excited, although very nervous because, tomorrow night my favorite team plays. So excited to talk about it this morning.
Should be crazy times. Well, we got 6 games this weekend. We got 2 Saturday, 3 Sunday, and then the Monday night game for whatever reason. But we've got 6 playoff games to look forward to. So let's talk about them. We're going to start with the first one of the weekend. That will be the Raiders heading to Cincinnati to take on Joe Burrow, Zach Taylor, and the Cincinnati Bengals. It's one of the interesting matchups. Not two teams we were not expecting to make the playoffs. But here we are, Zach Taylor in his 3rd year as head coach for Cincinnati in his first playoff appearance. And after a ton of turmoil early on in the season with former head coach John Gruden and Henry Ruggs, Rich Bisaccia found a way to keep the ship afloat for the Raiders. And here they are in a playoff spot at 10-7 after crazy events unfolded last Sunday. But I want to talk about Maxx Crosby real quick because he is the most impactful player for the Raiders in terms of getting to the quarterback and just bringing that energy that the team needs that a certain quarterback for the team just can't provide consistently when he's out on the field. So, Sean, I will start with you. Maxx Crosby in the 4th quarter against the Chargers had 8 pressures on Justin Herbert, which is the most pressures in a 4th quarter since TJ Watt had 9 in week 9 last season against the Cowboys. So I'll ask you, we've had questions about Cincinnati's O-line, and Jamar Chase versus Penei Sewell way back during the draft. So how does Cincinnati's defense prevent Maxx Crosby from being the most impactful player on the field tomorrow afternoon?
Essentially, they have to help Joe Burrow by getting the ball out at least somewhat quickly. The best way to neutralize a pass rush is screens, draws, quick passes. That's how you neutralize a very ferocious pass rush. But in another way, it also falls on the man himself, Joe Burrow. Justin Herbert had an incredible 4th quarter, even though, as you said, Maxx Crosby had 8 quarterback pressures on him. So Burrow has to extend the drives constantly. He has to get away from pressure. He has to buy himself time from Maxx Crosby because Crosby's going to get pressure. He is very good at this. And the Bengals offensive line is probably the weakest unit on the team, which is the one concern I really have for Cincinnati going into the postseason, is that offensive line. Yes, we talked about Jamar Chase versus Penei Sewell. We've talked about that since the NFL draft happened. The Bengals definitely made the right pick. I don't think there's any question about that at this point. Jamar Chase is going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, and his connection with Joe Burrow has made it worth it. But they still have to address the offensive line. Their first-round pick in this upcoming NFL draft, regardless where it is, should be an offensive lineman. That they need to bolster that up. So if they're going to win on Sunday and play the way that they've had the last few weeks of the season, not counting the Week 18 loss to the Browns, where Burrow didn't play, the play calling needs to be Joe Burrow friendly. Screens, draws, quick passes, because all 3 of those things neutralizes pass rush very well. But the most importantly, Joe Burrow himself needs to buy time and escape the pressure. Because if all four of these things can happen, Burrow's going to have his opportunities down the field. And I'm sorry, Cameron, but if Maxx Crosby and the Raiders cannot get pressure on Joe Burrow is going to light up the Las Vegas Raiders secondary like a Christmas tree. Plain and simple. The Raiders do not have the secondary to cover Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, CJ Uzomah. But then again, what secondary besides maybe the Los Angeles Rams do have that secondary? So it's a very tough challenge for the Raiders. Joe Burrow has the opportunity to have a huge game. Those four things that I mentioned earlier just need to happen to make sure that Joe Burrow doesn't get harassed constantly by Maxx Crosby and be on the ground constantly.
And you also got to take into account that Derek Carr is a quarterback that's left a lot of points unaccounted for on very important drives. You know, the Raiders can collect all the turnovers they want, but if Derek Carr is only getting 3 points and missing out on the other 4, then that kind of opens the door for Cincinnati, and they will score. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon, that team will score a lot. The Raiders have to respond whenever Cincinnati scores. But Evan, we've got a lot of first-timers in the playoffs. You have Joe Burrow and Derek Carr. Derek Carr was injured in 2016, the last time the Raiders made the playoffs. So who do you believe in more? Is it that second-year quarterback, Joe Burrow, with how great of a season he has? Or do you go with the guy that is maybe potentially motivated to make his first playoff start after he couldn't in 2016?
I definitely think that Derek Carr could have the argument for him that he's been waiting for this opportunity his entire career, and that the fact that he did miss out on those 2016 playoffs, he's hungry for this. And now that he has the opportunity, he could show out. But I'm a bigger believer in what Joe Burrow's been doing this season. He's been one of the most consistent quarterbacks in the National Football League in his second year. It's hard for me to go against a quarterback who has accomplished so much with such a stripped down team. I mean, Joe Burrow's been the most sacked quarterback in the NFL this year, a season removed from missing the end of the season due to injury. So the Bengals do need to address their offensive line, but at the same time, Joe Burrow's managed to have an amazing season while still getting rattled. So I don't know if Maxx Crosby alone getting to him is going to be enough to stifle this Bengals offense, especially the way they're able to run the ball on the ground with Mixon and really get things going that way. And then, like Sean said, they have so many targets on that offensive side of the ball at receiver. So it's going to be hard for the Raiders to cover that up. And I just don't think the Raiders have the firepower on offense for Derek Carr to be able to keep up with Joe Burrow.
Brenden, if the Raiders are to go into Cincinnati and pull off the road upset, how do they do it? Is it on the defensive side, which has been arguably the more impactful part than the offense, or does Derek Carr have to be mistake-free?
Well, it's certainly a bit of both, right? I mean, in the playoffs, everything goes. You got to play offense, you got to play defense. But if you're going to go toe-to-toe with Joe Shiesty and the Cincinnati Bengals, then you're going to have to go toe-to-toe with them on offense. Obviously, the defensive aspect of it is important. If you're going against a team that can sort of go off and score, 30, 40 points in a game like Cincinnati is, you run the risk of you falling behind very early. And with that being said, you're going to have to go toe-to-toe with them on offense. Derek Carr is going to have to find connections with Hunter Renfrow. The running game is going to have to be shored up. You got to hope that Josh Jacobs has a good game, because if the Bengals get on a quick 10-0, 14-0 lead early on in the first quarter, the game might be as good as done. I don't know how the Raiders can come back from a deficit like that.
Well, we will do our score predictions later, but let's continue talking about some of the other games. Saturday night, we have AFC East rivals in the New England Patriots and Buffalo Bills. New England heading to Orchard Park to take on the Bills, and it's going to be a cold one. Not much snow or rain. I don't know if wind will play a factor, but we remember the last time wind played a factor, it was a very, very low-scoring game, and I believe, Mac Jones threw, 12 passing yards? 3 passing yards. Even less. So, obviously, Sean, you're quite excited for this matchup, but going into this game, who should be trusted more? Should it be New England's defense that sort of looked like the old school Bill Belichick teams unlike last year, or Buffalo's offense and how explosive Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs can be when they choose to?
Here's the thing, Cameron. I don't need to answer that question because Josh Allen already did back in week 16. When the Buffalo Bills went to Foxborough and took on the Patriots, the AFC title was on the line. Whoever won that game was going to win the division title. It was essentially a de facto AFC East championship game. And what did Josh Allen do? He improvised. He got away from the Patriots' pass rush and was able to make some phenomenal plays in that game. The final drive for the Bills, there was third down conversion after fourth down conversion after third down conversion. Let me remind you of this. The Bills had 3rd and 10 at the Patriots' 26-yard line. Josh Allen converted a shovel pass to Stephon Diggs for the first down, getting away from the Patriots' pass rush. What did he do on the very next play when they had 2 plays later when they had 2nd and goal at the 2-yard line? Allen rolled to the left, was under intense pressure, and just flicked it to Dawson Knox for the touchdown. So 2 of the last 3 plays of what was the biggest drive of the game, Josh Allen improvised. The Patriots could not have played those 2 plays any better. They had all the receivers covered. They had perfect positioning in their zone coverage. They got pressure on Josh Allen. They beat the Bills' offensive line on both of those plays. On the touchdown play, the Patriots had 3 guys running right at Josh Allen. That's what you want to do, right? You want to get past the offensive line and put yourself in position to harass the quarterback. And Josh Allen is, unfortunately for the Patriots, is so talented and so special that he just did a simple flick of the wrist, got the ball to Dawson Knox, and that was a touchdown. Game over. The Buffalo Bills went into Foxborough and picked up the W. So honestly, those 2 plays answer that question right there. The Patriots defense could play perfectly, and it still won't matter because Josh Allen is very talented. He is great at improvisation, like a stand-up comedian, and he is able to overcome great defense. So on Saturday, I feel like it's going to be more of the same. Patriots defense is going to play well. Josh Allen's just going to play a little better. It's not going to be fun for me to watch, but I have to tell it how it is.
Now, Evan, Josh Allen hasn't been perfect this entire season. 15 interceptions is not a number you'd want as a quarterback, and it puts him towards the top of the league interception, tied for 2nd with Taylor Heineke. So, we're back in the playoffs. He played well in his playoff run last year, and you could say that Buffalo's offense has improved dramatically when you look at their rushing offense as well. They were not one of the better rushing teams in the NFL this year, but they've stepped it up this year, and they're just outside the top 5 in rushing yards this season. So, when you look at time of possession and Josh Allen not making mistakes, that run game has to make up for that. Am I right?
I'd 110% agree. I think the run game is really what matters most when we get into playoff football because if you're able to run the ball effectively in the playoffs, you can, like Cam said, you can control the pacing, you can control time of possession, you can control the ball and protect it by keeping it on the ground, keeping it away from your opponent, not throwing interceptions, especially. I think it's always been a concern for Josh Allen has been the turnover issues. He's been very gutsy with his throws throughout his entire NFL career. I mean, there were some throws in that first playoff game he had a couple of years ago against Houston where he was just throwing it into the defensive meeting room and ended up did the Bills end up losing that game, I think, because of that? Yes. So, I mean, it's weird saying the Bills lost to the Texans in the playoffs at this point, but that's a much different time. But that being said, Breida, Moss, and Singletary are all going to have to get touches. They're all going to have to pick up chunk yardage in situations and in order to keep the offense moving. Josh Allen can do plenty with his arm. He can get a deep downfield to, I mean, you have Cole Beasley, you have Stephon Diggs, and you have Dawson Knox and Emmanuel Sanders. You have a plethora of weapons on that side of the ball. But in order to protect it from this Patriots defense, who's one of the best in the league at holding teams off the scoreboard, they need to be able to run the ball effectively. But that's not going to be easy. So it's going to matter on whether or not Singletary can get going on the ground for the Bills, on whether or not they have success against the Patriots.
Brenden, if you were a betting man, are we holding with the Bills, or would you go for a Patriots upset, knowing Bill Belichick can sort of create magic during the postseason?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what the spread would be on this game, but if I were a betting man, I don't even know if I would want to touch this game because it's really a pick'em in my mind. I'm sure people listening will get to read this in a little bit, but I'm writing I wrote a preview for this game for the Rich Report. And basically, the thing that caught my eye when looking into it is the weather. We talked about that second game that the Bills and Patriots played this year, but that first game they played back in I believe it was week 13. That was the super cold weather game where the wind was, reaching 40 miles per hour. And while this game on Saturday won't hit those exact same numbers with the wind, it's going to be in the single digits. It's could possibly be the second coldest game, home game in Bills history, which is something insane to see, knowing how cold it can get over there. And what I would be looking into is what exactly can Josh Allen do in this cold weather? He's played 5 career cold weather games, that being in 32 degrees Fahrenheit or less. And in those games, he has a completion rating of 50.3, and he averages 166 passing yards with 6 total touchdowns and 7 interceptions. So knowing that going in, you're going to expect him to run the ball, like Evan said. You're going to expect him to get Singletary some touches, Moss some touches, and maybe even get Josh Allen with some design runs as well. In that Week 13 game, Josh Allen was the Bills' leading rusher. He had 39 yards, and the Bills only had 99 yards for that entire game. That's not going to fly. Now, a lot of that was the wind. Thankfully for them, the wind's not going to be as much of a factor. I think it's like 5 to 10 miles per hour. That is going to affect wind chill, though. And the wind chill might get down into the negatives. So if I'm a betting man, I don't know. That's so tough. I mean, I think the Bills, we'll get into this, I'm sure, a little bit, but I think the Bills will pull this one out, mainly because I think that roster is so stacked, and I think the Patriots are still reeling with injuries. I'm sure most of the people on the injury report will play, but maybe not at their, they probably won't be at 100%. But I think the Bills they're going to focus on the running game. I think they're going to have to try and do some things and try and out chess play Bill Belichick, which is almost impossible to do. But I think that they have the talent to pull it off in a close one.
Before we get to score predictions, I know it's a long shot, but the Steelers, the game hasn't started. They have a chance to beat the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday night. But how do they get that done? Is it TJ Watt? Can they not turn over the ball? Because they did turn it over 3 times against the Kansas City Chiefs in their first meeting this season back on December 26th when the Chiefs won 36-10. Sean, I know nobody wants to lose by 26 points, and the odds don't look good when you have to rematch a team you just lost to by 26 points. But is there any path to a Steelers victory on Sunday?
I have rarely seen a NFL playoff game in my nearly 20 years of watching NFL of how lopsided this matchup looks. Literally go back 3 weeks. The Kansas City Chiefs annihilated the Pittsburgh Steelers 36-10. And here's the thing about those 10 points. 7 of those were with like 2 minutes to go in the game. The score in actuality was more 36-3. was more like it. The Chiefs completely ran the Steelers out of the building. And here's the thing, the Chiefs didn't even play that well. They really didn't, honestly. The Chiefs left a lot of points on the scoreboard like Derek Carr does. They kicked field goals throughout the first half. They didn't truly pull away till the third quarter. And guess what? The Chiefs still annihilated them. The Chiefs could have played way better, and they still won 36-10. So if the Steelers are somehow going to pull off what could be a Super Bowl 42, Super Bowl 3 size upset, because that's what this would be, just putting it straight up out there. Two things need to happen for them to even have a chance. Number one, they have to have the ball for at least 40 minutes of time. If Patrick Mahomes has the ball for even more than 20 minutes, the Steelers have no chance. Because the Steelers do not have the secondary to keep up with all those fast wide receivers running over the middle of the field. And Patrick Mahomes get the ball out so quickly that it's very hard to make him uncomfortable. It's also hard to make him comfortable because he's dealt with a lot of situations. You think he's going to be more uncomfortable than he was in the Super Bowl last year? No. That's probably the most uncomfortable he'll ever get in an NFL game. So, if the Steelers are going to win this game, they're going to have to keep the ball for at least 40 minutes just so they can score points, keep the ball away from Patrick Mahomes, and maybe, just maybe, their defense can be rested enough where they can actually make a stand or two. And here's the other thing, too. I mentioned how Patrick Mahomes gets the ball out so quickly. Well, you need to make the Kansas City Chiefs predictable. Completely shut down their running game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been injured all season long. Darrell Williams has been a formidable number 2 place option. But at the same time, the Chiefs' running game has not been their strength. If you can completely take away the Chiefs' running game, and I mean completely take it away, I define that as holding the Chiefs to under 50 yards rushing. That's what they need to do. They need to make the Chiefs play calling more predictable. Oh, you're going to throw in every single play because you can't run the ball on us. If that's what they need to do, that's what they need to do. They need to not only keep the ball away from Patrick Mahomes for over 40 minutes of game time, but also hold the Chiefs rushing to under 50 yards just so the play calling becomes predictable. But even if those two things happen, I still don't even know if they can win. That's how unlikely this is, but there's your formula.
Evan, is there any other path outside of what Sean said that could potentially help the Steelers win? Is there any chance we could get some vintage Big Ben in what is most likely going to be his final NFL game? I mean, every game from now on here is potentially Big Ben's final NFL game.
I literally wrote that in my notes, answering the question of how the Steelers upset the Chiefs, and it's Big Ben plays like he's 30 again, and they're in 2011 making a run to the Super Bowl to take on the Green Bay Packers. But I think it's super unlikely. But if they're gonna have any chance, like Sean said, Pittsburgh doesn't have a strong enough secondary to keep up with these Kansas City wide receivers. But I mean, that doesn't take away from the fact that you can go out and play fundamentally sound football and just execute your assignments for an entire game. There's no reason that's out of the realm of possibility. So it's just going to take an extremely disciplined effort from the secondary, I think, to kind of limit what Tyreek Hill and the Chiefs receivers can do. In your zones, you can't let Tyreek Hill get over the top of you. You can't let him get past you or else he's going to burn you for a touchdown. Like, you just can't let them have those easy points and easy plays, which we're so accustomed to seeing from the Chiefs. And I think that's why it seems like such a tall, daunting task, because this Steelers offense has struggled scoring all season. They're not a very good scoring offense, and this Chiefs offense is one of the best in the league, and the Steelers defense might not have enough power to keep up with it. So that being said, it just seems impossible that the Steelers could get the win. But in my opinion, if they're able to get their ground game going and, like Sean said, dominate time of possession, I think Najee Harris could be a playoff superhero in kind of be the guy that carries the Steelers. Again, I don't think that's going to happen, though. I think the Chiefs are too fundamentally sound as a whole unit, and the Steelers kind of wandered and stumbled their way into the playoffs and weren't even expecting to be there. So I think it just two teams with two different mentalities going into this game.
Brenden, you could start off the final score predictions for us. Since we're on the topic of Steelers and Chiefs, where are we sitting? So I think it's going to be the Chiefs, but by how much?
That is the age-old question. I think that, well, for one, that the Steelers do want to have a chance this game. They need to hope that Patrick Mahomes gets hurt. That's plain and simple where it goes to, because we go back to last year, the divisional round of the Chiefs. Yeah, exactly.
Don't pray for injuries. Come on now.
I'm not saying I want it. I'm just saying that's what it's going to have to come down to. If it goes back to last year in the divisional round where Chiefs played the Browns, Mahomes got hurt and it went down until the very last play and went down to the last drive for the Chiefs to seal it. If I had to put a score on this game, and the Chiefs beat them by 26, I think that now that the Steelers have seen them at least one time, and I think that now they're playing more free because they're playing with house money. There are no expectations. Big Ben even said it himself. He's like, hey, we have no chance. Let's just go out and see what happens. I think with that in mind, I think you see a bit of a smaller gap in the score, but I do think the Chiefs win it handily. If I had to put a score on it, I'm going to say Chiefs 34, Steelers 21.
Sean.
I don't think this is going to be close whatsoever. Big Ben is he's not doesn't have it anymore. He is very shot. He is just not a good quarterback anymore. And I still am asking myself how on earth the Steelers made the playoffs with this situation. It's insane to me. It's insane to me that they made the playoffs over Jonathan Taylor and Justin Herbert.
They were a rookie coach timeout away from not making the playoffs. So there's that.
That is also very true. So I think Kansas City is going to dominate this game. I'm going to say Kansas City wins this game 31-7.
Evan.
I'm on the same train as Sean in this one. I think Big Ben's going to have a spaghetti noodle for an arm playing this many games in one season for the first time in I don't even know how long. So 44-0 Chiefs. They're running away with it. Big Ben's going to throw 3 picks. I'm calling that as part of my final score prediction.
Won't get as crazy as Evan, but I do think the Chiefs will dominate this entire game. I'm going to say the Chiefs win 20-10, and the Chiefs will flush out the Steelers. All right, going back to Saturday, Raiders-Bengals. Probably a more competitive game than Steelers and Chiefs would be, hopefully. But, Sean, how are you feeling with this one?
I think this is going to be a very close game. Derek Carr, say what you want about him, ultimate Derek Carr hater over there. But I think that Derek Carr has one thing going for him. And there is one thing about Derek Carr that you absolutely cannot say, is that he doesn't have toughness and resolve. Derek Carr is gritty. He has a lot of leadership. He also has a lot of grit. He has a lot of toughness. You cannot deny that, Derek Carr hater. You cannot deny this. Derek Carr is going to play out of his mind to try to keep the Las Vegas Raiders in this game. And Hunter Renfrow is a very tough cover in this league. Also, Josh Jacobs is a very patient runner. He's basically taking the form of Le'Veon Bell, where he just waits for those holes to open up and then just bursts through them. If you watch Josh Jacobs' highlights on Sunday night against the Chargers, he ran like a prime Le'Veon Bell did, just waiting for those holes to open up. The Raiders are going to keep this competitive. But in the end, though, the Raiders do not have the secondary or the linebackers to keep up with all the targets that the Bengals have on their team. But then again, like I said, very, very few teams do. I think that the Raiders are going to keep this competitive the entire game. But I think the Bengals kick a late field goal to go up 2 possessions and pull away with the victory, I think the final score is going to be 34-24 Cincinnati.
Evan.
I'm with Sean in this one, with Cincinnati getting the win, but I do think that, and with a slightly bigger win, but I do think the game will still be just as competitive, a one possession game actually. And I think the Bengals win at 31-23, get the 8-point victory with the Raiders having to kick some field goals in there.
Brenden.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna err on the side that it will also be a competitive game, and I think it's gonna be very close. I think it comes down to a last-second field goal. I think the Bengals.
Another last-second field goal for the Raiders. This would be what 6 for them this year if it would have happened again.
I'm going with the Bengals getting the last-second field goal in this one. I think that the Cincinnati's going to get the ball back. The Raiders will somehow find a way to tie the game. Joe Burrow, he'll get the ball with 2 minutes left. They'll go on an insane 2-minute drill, and they'll set themselves up in good field goal range to hit it in the last second. I think the Chiefs will win their first playoff game in, I don't even know how long, decades.
Final score?
I'm going to go 31-28.
I think it's going to be a much grittier game, closer to what we got between the Raiders and Browns, which was an absolute mess that came down to Daniel Carlson doing Daniel Carlson things. But as much as I hate to say it, I think the Bengals will come out on top. Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, that entire offense is just too good to be contained. But the defense will do their best. But at the end of the day, I just don't think Derek Carr is going to make enough plays to set the Raiders up for success. And the Bengals, with it being another unanimous decision that the Bengals will win, the Bengals have flushed out the Raiders for Saturday. Now, a much more interesting one, Patriots and Bills. I know we all talked about the Bills, having that advantage, but how are we feeling about Patriots and Bills? Sean, can the Patriots upset the Bills?
As much as I would love to go on here and say that the Patriots are going to get it done, they're going to pull off the upset. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. As much as it pains for me to say, Josh Allen is much better than Mac Jones right now. He has a lot more tools. He has a lot more tools to work with. He has mobility. He has many different kinds of passes that he can use. He also has much better weapons than Mac Jones has. The Bills just simply bring a lot more to the table offensively than the Patriots do. Both defenses are going to be great. This is going to be an ugly, low-scoring game. I think only 2 touchdowns combined are going to be scored in this game. But both of them are going to be scored by the Buffalo Bills. I think that the Bills win this game in an incredibly gritty, old school, low scoring game, 14-9.
Evan.
I think this is going to be the closest of the playoff games this weekend. I think it's a good defensive matchup as well as featuring 2 decent offenses. So I think there's going to be a little bit more scoring than Sean says, but not by much. And I think the Bills get the 3-point win over the Patriots, 20-17.
Brenden.
Well, I'm going to go one step further, and by one step I mean 1 point. I think that the Bills take the win 20-16. I think that, like we talked about before, Josh Allen doesn't have the greatest track record in cold weather games, but Mac Jones has yet to play a cold weather game in his short career. So I think that's something you have to keep an eye on. I don't know. His performance is the true wild card in this game. So I got the Bills 20-16.
I actually think this is going to be a greater than 1 possession game. I have the Bills winning 24-13. Think still going to be an ugly matchup. It's going to be a grind to watch, but Josh Allen's just going to make the plays that the Patriots offense is set up for, and the Bills will win the time of possession as well. I think that's going to be the biggest difference is time of possession. If New England can, they give themselves a greater chance than what we probably expect, but I think Buffalo has done a much better job. They're much more disciplined offensively now, even though Josh Allen did have a lot of mistakes this season. I just think they're honed in now and know what they want at this point of the season, and they're going to start making their run tomorrow night. And so another unanimous 4-0 decision. Jeez, we got teams just getting flushed out of the playoffs instantly, and we probably have another one coming as Sunday begins with the Eagles and the Buccaneers. Nick Sirianni going up against the Super Bowl champions and Bruce Arians, Tom Brady, and a bunch of other great players on the Buccaneers. Guys, just say it. Is it all the Eagles? We don't even need. Is it all the Bucs? We don't need score predictions here. Yes, everybody's saying it's the Buccaneers. Anything else? Maybe here. We got 49ers and Cowboys, which is the Nickelodeon game. It's going to be on CBS as well. Sean, I know you're very high on the San Francisco 49ers. So, can they beat the Dallas Cowboys?
This is going to be by far the best game this weekend. And I'll be honest, I'm not 100% confident on this pick. I am for the other 5 games, but not this one. This is a very interesting matchup when you look at the breakdown. The Cowboys struggle against the run, and the 49ers run the ball very well and are very creative on the ground. Also, the Cowboys don't really have that secondary player that can keep up with Deebo Samuel. And then on the other side of the ball, the Cowboys struggle against defenses that are more aggressive. So San Francisco does have the edge in a lot of areas. But here's the thing, though. I still think the Cowboys are going to win, though. The reason I think this is 2 reasons. First, when you look at Jimmy G's clutch performances throughout his career, a lot of those clutch performances have come against teams that don't have the greatest pass rush. 2019 against the Saints. The Saints defense was much better in the secondary and linebackers than they were pass rushing. Also, his clutch performance against the Rams last week. Let's be real, the Rams didn't play with the most urgency as the Seattle Seahawks pulled away from the Arizona Cardinals late in the game. And also the Rams have struggled to rush the passer at times this season. The Rams are much better at stopping the run than they are the pass. So Jimmy G is going to have to go up against DeMarcus Lawrence, Randy Gregory, and Micah Parsons. I think that San Francisco is going to have the ball down 3 late in the game, but one of those 3 guys are going to strip sack Jimmy G, and the Cowboys are going to hold on for the victory. The other thing, I think that for this game, CeeDee Lamb is going to go nuclear in this game. Because when you look at the 49ers defense, they have a very good front 7. I don't think the Cowboys are going to run the ball very well, but the 49ers secondary leaves a lot to be desired. All season long, the 49ers secondary has been very hit or miss. And against a very good Cowboys pass catching core, I just don't see the 49ers secondary keeping up with them. I think the Cowboys win this game in the game of the weekend 23-20.
Evan.
I'm on the opposite end of the train here. I think it's the first time we're having a split for any of these. I think the 49ers rush game and defense will be enough to hold Dallas. Dallas is coming off a huge win against the Eagles, but the Eagles are the weakest team in the entire playoff field. So I don't know how I feel coming off that. The 49ers are coming off a win over the Rams, who are one of the best teams in football. Yeah, they've had their ups and downs this season, and Matthew Stafford hasn't always played consistently. But the Rams are still one of the better teams in football as a complete squad, and they were able to overcome that. So I don't think they're going to have it's not going to be difficult for the 49ers to overcome the Cowboys, who have relatively little playoff experience. Jimmy G's been here before. He's made it through the opening rounds. He's going to get it done 27-21.
That is our first upset of yes, there it is. I thought that was a different sound than what I was expecting. So there's that. That's our upset sound for today. But the 49ers, from Evan. Brenden, do you see it the same way, or do the Cowboys take care of business?
I think I would have seen it the same way if Jimmy G were playing 100%. And he's still dealing with that torn UCL on his thumb. So props to him. He played very well on that injury against the Rams, and he certainly led that team to victory. But I think that's going to catch up to him. I think that the amount of pressure that the Cowboys put on him, they're going to make difficult throws. They're going to force him to make quick throws that might aggravate his injury a little bit more. And with all that in mind, I think the 49ers are gonna have to rely more on their run game. They're gonna realize that they're dealing with a hampered quarterback. I like Jimmy G a lot, and I think he certainly deserved to keep his role that he's had as a starting quarterback. But injuries catch up to all of us, and I think that with an emphasis on the running game, I think the Cowboys will hone in on that. And I think the Cowboys they've had a lot of great offensive performances against not great competition, Washington and Philadelphia. But I think the Cowboys do take this one. Final score, I'm going to say 45-28 Cowboys.
Wow, very high scoring game in Brendan's eye. But before we move on to our next topic, Brenden, you won't be on Monday to preview Rams and Cardinals. So what's your final score prediction for that game Monday night?
Now, this one might be the toughest one, in my opinion. I think this might be even tougher one to pick than Dallas and San Francisco. So the Cardinals, early on in the season, they came into SoFi and completely waxed the Rams. And the Rams came back into State Farm and took the win there. I don't think that the Rams will deal with the same, fan issues that they had against the 49ers. I think LA just has a ton of 49er fans, given how long LA went without a team. I think that having that game on the schedule, since the beginning of the year, allowed 49er fans to fill that stadium. I don't think that's going to be the same case with this playoff game that has only been on the books for a week. I think that you'll see a larger contingency of Rams fans there compared to Cardinals fans. So I'm sure they'll certainly be relieved to see that. I think that it all comes down to Matthew Stafford. I think Matthew's going to have a consistent game. He can't throw 2 picks in a half. Like he can get away with throwing 2 picks if he has some really good drives, throughout the rest of the game. But he certainly cannot do that consistently and give the momentum, because they are a fiery team as well. And Kyler Murray and that team have been waiting for this opportunity to play in the playoffs. Cliff Kingsbury says that he thinks Kyler's going to win the game of his career, which is certainly setting the bar high for him. But I think that the Rams, they've had some tough losses. They've certainly come close in a lot of games. I do think they pull this one out. I think it's going to be a close one. Final score, that's tough. I'm going to say 28-21 Rams.
I forgot to say my prediction for Cowboys 49ers. Again, I think when you look at the stakes of last weekend, the 49ers were pretty much fighting for their lives, while the Rams were kind of just set up, especially after the Seahawks were taking care of business against the Cardinals. Don't think the Rams were pushing it all that much, although Matthew Stafford looked kind of weird at certain points of the game, especially some bad throws late. But I just think it's the Cowboys' time. I think they're going to make that run to the NFC title game. Finally, Cowboys fans can enjoy something for the first time in about 20 years. Let's hope so. But the Cowboys will win this game 31-17. Just love that offense. Love what Micah Parsons has done for that defense. They're just, it's a special year for them, I think. And I think they're going to prove that starting with Sunday. All right, let's move out of the playoffs and talk about some of the coaching changes that have happened in the NFL. Obviously, Brian Flores was a Monday firing, but took a couple days for the Texans to fire David Culley, which is awkwardly late for coaches to be fired, and is still a questionable firing, in my opinion, because did we expect the Texans to win 4 games, let alone get a win over the Tennessee Titans this season? It seems like coaches that have their teams fighting yet don't make the playoffs are the ones that are getting fired. I know, of course, Matt Nagy Matt Nagy's been fired. Mike Zimmer's been fired. But Flores and Culley, two guys that I would say had their teams fighting. The Texans had an 0-16 roster for sure. Brian Flores doesn't have that great of a quarterback in Tua, and yet had a winning record. Beat New England on the final week of the season when New England was still fighting for a lot in terms of a division title and seeding for the playoffs. Yet both those guys do not have head coaching jobs. Meanwhile, Matt Rule, who sits at 5-12, who sat at 5-12 this season, did not improve from last season to this season and absolutely failed with Sam Darnold, was guaranteed assurance with his fat contract with Carolina. So my question is, why are Culley and Flores judged so hard? Why do they have to be, out of the gate incredibly good? And why guys like Matt Rule could get just reassurance when their team goes 5-12 after starting 3-0? Carolina finished 2-12 this season. I have a feeling I know what the answer is. I can tell you right now, if Matt Rule was a black head coach, he'd be out at Carolina already. That's my thought on it. But Sean, why are Culley and Flores judged so much harder than guys like Matt Rule or even Cliff Kingsbury could say out of after his first season and the letdown in the second half?
Here's what I will say. I think that these two coaches are out. I think the reason that you say, Cam, I think that is definitely valid. Here's what I will add on top of what you said. I think owners and GMs are just impatient. I think that outside of Robert Kraft, the Rooney family, and several others, most owners are just impatient. They don't trust the process. That's sadly the way it is right now. David Culley did the best job that he possibly could. I was very critical of that hire because he was the passing game coordinator of a team that finished 32nd in passing in 2020. So when that hire happened, I was very like, wait, what? Of all guys to hire, you're hiring a passing game coordinator whose team finished 32nd in passing? Something doesn't seem right about that. So it seemed like David Culley was already set up to fail. And it was basically a year of transition for the Houston Texans. No Deshaun Watson, no DeAndre Hopkins, no J.J. Watt, which is weird to say, 2 years ago for the Houston Texans. What more was he supposed to do this season? The Texans had arguably the worst roster in the league, and they won 4 games. They beat the Chargers, which in retrospect kind of eliminated them from the playoffs. They beat the Tennessee Titans, who ended up being the number 1 seed in the playoffs. They nearly beat them a second time last week as Davis Mills and Danny Amendola just went absolutely off. And they also swept Jacksonville for whatever that's worth. So the Texans were very solid. Davis Mills, honestly, I think there's something there, and I think that Davis Mills could easily be the week 1 starter next season. Let's see what he can do. He definitely showed that he can be a long-term answer. Let's see what he does for a full season before we make judgment first. But he looked good, and I think David Culley had the Texans team with a lot of passion. Texans looked like they wanted to play hard every single game, and I think that's a credit to David Culley. If you're going to put a guy in for a year, then give him a 1-year contract. Don't give him a multi-year contract and then just fire him. Like, what more was he supposed to do with that? I think Nick Caserio is so eager on getting a former Patriot in there that he just like, oh, David Culley, you're gone. We couldn't get an expatriate last year. Let's get an expatriate now. They are looking at Gerard Mayo, who was a great player, and I think is a very smart coach and will be a good NFL head coach, although I think it's a 1 year too early for him to do that. I think he needs another year of being an assistant coach. I just think that Nick Caserio is impatient. He wanted to get a Patriot in there because he wants to be the new Patriots. But just ask the Detroit Lions how that worked out for them. Just ask the New York Giants how that worked out for them. People need to stop ripping off the Patriots, because if you do, you're just going to get the Walmart version of a product, and we all know how that's a no bueno. That is definitely a no bueno. So
you say they're impatient, yet here we are. Matt Rule's guaranteed reassurance after going 5-12, and Mike Zimmer had the greatest job security in the world, even though the Vikings pretty much let down season after season. I mean, getting blown out by Nick Foles in an NFC title game and then get blown out, the following year or 2 years later by San Francisco in a wild card game. I mean, the Vikings had squads. They had great defenses, and Kirk Cousins is a formidable, mistake-prone quarterback. He is a formidable quarterback, and that offense is usually pretty exciting to watch. But, I mean, there are coaches out there, there are GMs out there who have been patient with these certain coaches.
Yes, but Nick Caserio is not one of these GMs. I also think that owner Stephen Ross of the Dolphins is also not patient. It is. You also have to keep in mind, and when you look at Miami as a whole, that is a very passive culture. What I mean by that is you are in the state of Miami where you can go to the beach 365 days a year. There's a lot to do in the Miami area. If you're not going to have a product that draws fans to the game on a consistent basis, they'll just move on to the next one. Stephen Ross is not a patient owner. The city of Miami is not a place where football is the end all be all. It simply is not. It's like LA, where if you don't have a product that makes people want to go out to games over going to the beach, you got a problem. And I think with the way Tua Tagovailoa has been, it's just the Dolphins are not a fun team to watch. If you're going to sit here and tell me that the Dolphins are a fun team to watch, you're joking with yourself. I think that Stephen Ross got impatient with the fact that the Dolphins weren't the most fun team to watch. The problem with that is that Brian Flores was not the problem. Your problem was Tua Tagovailoa. Colin Cowherd said it best. You need to stop lying about what you have with Tua. He's very limited and is not going to really get you anywhere. They need to move on from Tua because he's not it. The Dolphins are a very boring team to watch. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. And Brian Flores was unfortunately the scapegoat. I think you either have owners and GMs that are too impatient or you have owners and GMs that are too patient. There's not enough balance in the NFL for where every single Black Monday and coaching carousel, we're left shaking our heads. I genuinely think that is a part of it. Now, Cam, I think what you're saying is also completely valid. What I am saying is merely adding on to that.
Yeah, and while I'm no fan of the Rooney Rule because you shouldn't be required to hire a minority or at least interview them, you should want to hire them because they're good coaches. But to even have it be inserted into the NFL is a problem because that shows that there is a lack of representation and GMs and owners are unwilling to go outside of people that look like them to hire them for their coaching staff. We currently have one Black NFL head coach, and that's future Hall of Famer Mike Tomlin, who just does a great job year in and year out with the Steelers, even though they have a quarterback who can't throw the football 15 yards downfield. And they're in the playoffs right now. But guys like Brian Flores, you miss out on the playoffs. Nope, not good enough. And I'm really curious as to how the college football landscape will play out in the next couple of years. I'm looking at a guy like Marcus Freeman for Notre Dame. How is he going to be viewed 3-4 years down the road? Because Matt Rule had one great year with Baylor. Boom, immediately shot up to head coach in the NFL. Joe Brady, he came to prominence as the offensive coordinator for LSU. Boom, NFL job immediately. But Marcus Freeman, defensive coordinator for Notre Dame, not as, attractive to what the current NFL is. When it's highly offensive, you got to be a quarterback whisperer, essentially like Cliff Kingsbury to get a job at Lincoln Riley. But that's going to be what I'm watching is how does the NFL and those that cover the NFL look at someone like Lincoln Riley, who's coaching at USC. If Malachi Brown in 2 years is a great quarterback and USC has an elite offense, is it going to be, oh, look how great Lincoln Riley is? But what if he and Freeman have the same resume at Notre Dame? They make it the playoffs a couple times, but go without a national title. Will everyone look at Lincoln Riley as the media darling? Is he the next NFL head coach, or will Marcus Freeman get those nods? Because Marcus Freeman did a great job as a defensive coordinator for Notre Dame. Now he's the head coach at one of the most prominent football programs in the nation. So, Evan, I'll ask you, do you think that's going to be something that can change this narrative for the NFL? Is Marcus Freeman getting those talks down the road? Or is it just going to be the status quo? And if Lincoln Riley and Marcus Freeman have comparative resumes, Lincoln Riley just gets that nod over Freeman.
Yeah, I think that Marcus Freeman definitely should get his shot eventually, but I think with that, and I do think it is unfair how you see all these college coaches who are gurus or program builders or culture setters, in these programs. And so an NFL team brings them in to try and not build up a college program at the NFL level, but instill a culture, instill a vibe, instill a winning program for at the NFL level. So, until, I mean, the NFL is a league that's player base is majority minority. There should be more representation among the coaching ranks from every race that's in the NFL, especially black head coaches. But that being said, I feel like Eric Bieniemy is about to finally get his due, the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, which is long overdue, and I think that's also part of the conversation. But this entire conversation of the racial inequity of NFL coaching hires is one as a whole that I might be a little underqualified to jump into as a whole. But I just want to bring up a couple things. The Bears fired Lovie Smith after going 10-6 with Jay Cutler as their quarterback. The Lions fired Jim Caldwell after he brought the most horrible organization in the NFL to the playoffs with just a few star players in a terrible roster behind them. Adam Gase got 2 opportunities of coaching in the AFC East as a head coach. He failed at the Dolphins, and then the Jets were like, I don't know, let's give this a shot, and hired him again. The NFL needs to do better. Owners need to do better. GMs need to do better at making sure the best, most qualified people are getting coaching jobs. Because I guarantee you, with the amount of black players that are in the NFL, there are plenty of available black coaches to hire who are going to be more competent than Adam Gase's of the world, who only got a job in the first place because he wore the little crown that said offensive coordinator while Peyton Manning called plays in Denver. He had 0 qualification to get a head coaching job besides shepherding already the greatest quarterback of all time during the end of his career when he was pretty much running an organization on his own. Adam Gase did nothing and he got a job. I'd like to see some other guys get some opportunities.
Yeah, Brenden, and we got guys waiting in the wings for their shot. Eric Bieniemy, Byron Leftwich. You can even bring up Todd Bowles again, although he wasn't as great as he was. But remember, he was having teams. He was the Jets head coach and did. It's the Jets. They don't produce talent. When you go to coach the New York Jets, if you're not someone that can change the landscape, you're not going to, the GMs and owners of the New York Jets are incompetent and they set up their teams to fail. That's why we'll talk about tanking and the draft down the road. But I say that teams tanking, it's not because of the effort of coaches and players. It's because these GMs purposely set up their teams for failures so that they can get some draft pick early on and just keep rebuilding for years and not have to pay any players, a high contract to at least make their team better. So focused on, we're going to get this superstar in the draft, but we'll save that for another time. But Brenden, we have guys like Bieniemy, Leftwich, Todd Bowles could get a second chance, back on head coaching jobs. So do you think any of these guys will end up getting hired as head coaches during this offseason?
Yeah, they absolutely should. I mean, I think the truth that you have to look at with these head coaching jobs and any head coaching job is, yes, these African-American coaches who have been around the game forever, many of whom, like any other coach, have played in the game, which I think is a huge upside that they can connect with their players on the field with an on-the-field aspect. A lot of it is not only should they get opportunities, they need to have good opportunities. Because a lot of times we see minority coaches get a job. Brian Flores is an example of that. They get a job, they're there for a few years, and they're the scapegoat. They're seen as the reason why the team didn't reach the potential that they should have, and because of that they're gone. So I think that's a reason why we haven't seen Eric Bieniemy get a head coach job, mainly because with all the media and everything going around and surrounding the support for Bieniemy, I think he could get a job if he wanted to. I think the problem is I think he knows that if he goes to a job to a team, an organization that is floundering, he knows he has. I think he has the foresight that maybe in 2 or 3 years that the team's going to let him go, and they're going to point to him as the reason why the team didn't succeed. When in reality, it's he did everything he could with whatever roster he had. So, looking at the head coaching jobs this year, I mean, there are a lot that are open. I think a majority of them are pretty favorable. I think a lot of them have a lot of potential. A lot of these teams were in the playoffs maybe a year or two ago. So I think that, yes, Brian Flores should be the leading candidate for almost all these positions. I think every team should basically write him not a blank check, but a blank contract in terms of how long he should be there, because it takes a long time to build culture. And I think what Sean was saying is completely accurate, that these team owners and GMs are just incredibly impatient, that they have a fan base breathing down their necks, wanting more. But in reality, the fan base just wants to see the team grow, and they want to see them grow gradually. And that's not what the GMs favor, because it affects their bottom line. So yes, I think that we will see a huge, not huge, but a raise in minority coaches getting hired. I mean, we've seen it before. We've seen, Robert Saleh. He had a year in his first year in New York with the Jets, and people are already calling for his job after a year. And it's ridiculous, because look at what that team is and what are the expectations there. It is all about, like what you guys mentioned, it's all about culture setting. It's all about building a team from essentially the ground up. And I think that everyone should be looking at Eric Bieniemy. Everyone should be looking at Brian Flores, because there are some good jobs here. There are some teams with promise. I think, Minnesota, you'll have that job security. You have a solid playoff roster, and we'll see what to do at quarterback, but you have a lot of leeway there. The Bears, you have your defense, and you have what, in my opinion, is going to be a franchise quarterback in Justin Fields. The list goes down. Even Jacksonville, all the culture issues that they've had there, going back even beyond this year. You have a lot of cap space like you did last season, and you have one of the highest potential quarterbacks in your locker room leading your team, who I think really truly started to come to form this at the end of this year in Trevor Lawrence. So I think that we will see a rise in minority coaches getting interviews, certainly, and especially getting jobs. And hopefully from here on out, those jobs will be worthwhile for them staying.
Yeah, and speaking of worthwhile, you say everyone should be on the radar for Brian Flores. That should be the number one option. But do we really want to see Brian Flores anywhere except for a team that can compete for a postseason spot out of the playoffs? And of the coaching jobs available, and I say the Raiders is available because Rich Bisaccia still has the interim tag on him, there's 7 jobs available. We got the Giants, the Vikings, the Bears, the Jaguars, the Raiders, the Dolphins, and the Broncos. Obviously, the Dolphins fired Flores, so he's not going back there. But that really leaves 2 teams for Flores, and that's the Raiders and the Broncos. Although the Broncos still need a quarterback. And if Denver were to hire Brian Flores, the same old questions of, well, do they have a quarterback? Because right now their quarterback locker room is Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater. 2 guys that have their faults and would just bring up the same questions that Flores had in Miami with Tua. When I look at someone, and this isn't being biased, let's just be honest here. Rich Bisaccia is good enough to keep a team afloat, but the Raiders need to transition to, we need to be a perennial contender for a playoff spot. We need to be closer to where the Chiefs are versus where the Broncos are. The Raiders have the talent to do it. Their defense improved tremendously this year, and that offense is formidable, but they need to rebuild around that O-line that got absolutely gutted last offseason. But obviously, we don't want to see him with the Giants. The Giants have a terrible ownership, terrible at building a roster. But maybe the Giants will have a culture change with Gettleman out too, although he was allowed to retire and not fired. But Sean, where do we see Flores next season? should it be a team that can win out of the gate if he were to join them, like the Raiders or the Broncos? Or will he end up going to a team that he has to rebuild again, like the Giants or the Bears? And I'd even say the Vikings, because I'd say that team is past their peak of this era of their franchise.
So I look at two things when it comes to that question. First of all, what is Brian Flores' strength besides culture building? Because we've already talked about that. His strength as a football coach is defense. He was the defensive mastermind behind one of the most dominant defense performances in Super Bowl history, where the Patriots held the Los Angeles Rams, who had one of the best offenses of the past decade, to 3 points in the Super Bowl. He was the mastermind behind that. So Brian Flores has proven that he is a great defensive coach. And with the Dolphins had a top 10 defense in both 2020 and 2021. So Brian Flores is great at coaching defense on top of his culture building. I'm looking at this list of head coaching openings, and there's a team that has had a defensive culture since 1920. That is the Monsters of the Midway in the Chicago Bears. I don't think that there is a better fit for Brian Flores than the Chicago Bears. Why? Because the Chicago Bears have a culture of defense. That's how they've been for over a century. That's how they've been. And who can make that defense from good to great? Brian Flores. Also, Justin Fields, I think, has a much higher ceiling than Tua has ever had. Justin Fields, in my opinion, will be a star quarterback in this league. He just had the unfortunate thing of not only
offensive line for Chicago.
No offensive line. That is also true. But I'll add two other things to that. One, Matt Nagy is the worst play caller I have ever seen. People blame Cody Parkey for that double doink loss. I blame Matt Nagy. I blame
even
Matt
worse
Nagy's play
than
calling.
Freddie Kitchens was.
Well, there's a reason Freddie Kitchens is not in the league anymore.
Hold on. Freddie Kitchens was a bad play designer. Matt Nagy's a bad play caller. Those are two very, very different things. But Matt Nagy's horrendous play call, which in my opinion was the real reason they lost that game to the Eagles, not Cody Parkey. Because if the Bears simply make a 2-point conversion, that kick never has to have to happen. But Matt Nagy decided to be terrible with his play calling. And he was terrible with his play calling all game. Instead of using Justin Fields' strength, which is mobility and throwing on the run, he decided to use him in the pocket like Andy Dalton, which did not work. But if Brian Flores hires an offensive coordinator that knows how to use Justin Fields' strengths well, that's a match made in heaven. Because not only is Brian Flores going to improve the Bears defense, which is what that culture is ever since they have existed, and he can hire an offensive coach that can improve Justin Fields, I think the Chicago Bears are going to be the winners of this entire offseason if they can do that. So there's your perfect fit right there.
Evan, do you agree with Sean? And if you don't, what team do you see Flores landing with? And what would be the best fit for him? Because I go back to the Raiders thing, and they can keep Bisaccia, but instead of him going back down to the special teams coordinator, why not just make him like an associate head coach or just like second to Flores? Because obviously the players have rallied around Bisaccia, but the Raiders could still manage to keep him unless another team really thinks Bisaccia could potentially lead them in the future.
Yeah, there's always an assistant to the head coach, but I 100% agree with Sean here. The Bears made the most sense right away. I mean, if you look at Justin Fields, he's kind of what everyone was hoping Tua would be, with maybe a little bit more ball security issues as of right now, but higher upside and playmaking ability, like Sean said. I think Justin Fields' potential is insanely high if put in the right scheme. I think also in order to take that job, there has to be a clear commitment from whoever the general manager is, as well as Brian Flores, that we need to upgrade our weapons. We need to get Justin Fields some playmakers. Because I'm sorry, Allen Robinson's not doing it anymore. he's had a good career, but he's not that number one receiver anymore. The Bears don't really have that solid group of core playmakers like some other teams have. So they're going to have to really invest on upgrading the offense for Flores to actually accomplish anything with the Bears. But I also think that it could be a quick and not easy rebuild, but if done the right way and under Brian Flores' philosophy with defense first, and then, I mean, we haven't really gotten to see what he likes to do on offense in entirety because he's been limited with his quarterback play the entire time in Miami. So I think that a new change of scenery, and I think a more defensive focused team that's been defensive focused for a long time, like Sean was saying, will better fit his identity, and he'll be better able to build his culture in the building because they're already accustomed to playing this nasty defense and dominating. And we're going to leave you black and blue from the game, like we're going to bruise you up. But again, like I said, I feel like I'm not overly familiar with the Bears' depth on their roster, but I feel like that could be a fairly quick rebuild where you're right back in the playoffs and competing fairly shortly after firing Nagy. And I think part of that is because Nagy kind of just kept a good roster intact while not doing anything with it. So, and Nagy never had a real culture that was built there in Chicago, which I think further allows Brian Flores to come in and instill his own with the current group of guys that are there.
Brenden, is there a possibility that we get the ultimate doomsday scenario and the Giants go out and hire Brian Flores without any type of identity?
No, because I don't think as much as they would want him, I think Brian Flores has a few better options that I think will offer him jobs as well. You would hope that's the case. If he gets relegated to the Giants, then I don't know what the NFL is doing at this point. But I like the pick to the Bears because they have a solid foundation. Like Evan said, a lot of the players are still around. At least Nagy was able to keep them around. But I'll go a different path. Just for the sake of variety. Jacksonville still has a lot of upside. I think the upside that they had last season, before they got Urban Meyer, the upside is still there. They still have a huge amount of cap space, among the top in the league. Now you do have Trevor Lawrence, who now has a year under his belt. He's gone through the motions. Obviously, he struggled early on, but that's typical for top pick quarterbacks, going on to bad teams. So you have a year under him. You still got the cap space. You're going to be getting your running backs back in, James Robinson, hopefully, and Travis Etienne, who obviously has a lot of chemistry with Trevor Lawrence going back to Clemson. So you already have that going for you. And like we've mentioned, it's in Florida. I know you say what you want the culture in for and more passive culture, but I think you bring in the right people. I think that Shad Khan has shown that he's willing to be patient, maybe too patient in the case of Urban Meyer, but he's willing to work with the team, work with coaches, work with GMs, and slowly, methodically build the team back up, because that's frankly where they're at right now. They are one of, if not the laughing stock of the NFL, and I think you bring in a guy like Brian Flores, who will only have to go. He won't have to move states. He'll get to stay in Florida. He'll get to continue coaching a Florida team that right now still has a lot of potential and just needs to work through it. I think you bring in Brian Flores. I think that brings in a lot. That is a huge aspect in terms of free agency alone. Just people are going to want to come to play in Jacksonville because they see Brian Flores coaching. And again, with that cap space, you won't have to convince them too much when you're able to pay those players more money than any other team would. So I think if Brian Flores gets the commitment from Shad Khan that, hey, this is good, you can't fire me in 3 years. Well, like if we have a winning record at all in these 3 years, there's no way you can fire me, right? Because that at this point, that's ludicrous if this happens again, because it can't. I think the NFL needs to do something about it. But I think Jacksonville makes a lot of sense for Brian Flores, but he does need to get a commitment from ownership and management that this is a process that he's going to be a part of for a long time.
Let's shift away from football. Let's talk about college basketball, and specifically the number of games that have been either canceled or postponed due to COVID protocols, and the West has been just absolutely decimated by COVID-19 protocols. So many games canceled and postponed. UCLA was off for about a month, and what happens? They played about their third or fourth game since coming back and get upset by Oregon in front of no fans at Pauley Pavilion. You had the broadcast with the legend himself, Bill Walton, having just a grand old time talking about the pandemic during the game and bringing up, how UCLA wants to welcome fans when they play Arizona and would be one of the biggest games of the college basketball season. But then you had Bill Walton going off of, well, are we going to trust the scientists? If we're doing that, then we can't have fans for that UCLA Arizona game. But just so much craziness happening, thinking, we're out of this already. By the time college basketball season started in November to now, COVID numbers are the highest they've been since the start of the pandemic. So now it's college basketball is now it seems like it's in flux again with so many games being canceled or postponed. And we don't know if those postponed games will even get canceled. And Brenden will touch on the Big Sky coming up. But Sean, I'll ask you this. Was March Madness in better shape last year than it is right now? Because with all these postponements, I'm kind of scared for what will happen come March.
Oh no, we're fine. You have to remember, there were teams that barely played 20 games last season. Some teams have already played about 20 games. I think we're in better shape this year just because we've actually had a lot more games than last year. Last year we barely had a November and December in college basketball. The only game I really remember in the first 2 months of the season last year was Kansas Gonzaga on Thanksgiving Day. Other than that, there was a massive amount of postponements. And remember, during both winters of the pandemic was the worst points. Last year in the wintertime was abysmal for COVID. In some ways, even worse than it is right now. Heck, I even got it last winter. It was terrible. Those were a miserable first 5 days. It was terrible. So I just think that during the winter months, COVID is a lot worse. But we're already seeing things start to improve. This past Wednesday, we had 78 scheduled games. 75 of them played. Only 30 games did not play as scheduled. That's pretty good, I think. That is pretty good. The cases are definitely dwindling across all sports. Yes, there are still some teams that are in COVID protocol, which I know Brenden and Cameron will talk about with NAU. But it is getting better across college basketball. We're getting a lot more games and a lot less postponed games. Gradually, we're going to get to a point where there's not a single postponed game. And I think come springtime, people will get out more. And I think that there's a lot more caution that's going to be taken. Because in winter, you got to stay inside and stay warm. It's harder to get away from COVID in the wintertime. That's just the way it is. So no, I'm not worried about this March Madness. Hopefully we don't get a repeat of VCU canceling that first round game, which I'm sorry, that was a travesty.
Thank God Oregon proved their worth by beating Iowa, because had they gotten beaten by Iowa, the optics would have not looked good.
Oh no, it would have been very bad. So Oregon had twice as much urgency as any other team in that second round last year to win that game, and they played like it. They dominated the Iowa Hawkeyes, getting to the Sweet 16. So I think that college basketball will be fine going forward. I think that the cases will start to dwindle the more and more we go along, the closer we get to spring, as it starts to get warmer in places. I think we're better heading into this March than last year. Last year was an utter mess.
Evan, do you think it's peak America that, now that, it's like, Omicron doesn't have as great of as harshest symptoms as, the early strands of it when we first started this pandemic and vaccines being available, to now it's like, okay, let's all throw caution to the wind. Let's not test if you're asymptomatic, and while from a sports perspective, I can understand that because players want to play. College players are in their final year, a lot of them, and they just want to play. They don't want to sit when they feel just fine, even though they did test positive. But in terms of this country's mindset and the impatience and selfishness that many Americans have. Is it just this peak country to say, you know what, because the symptoms aren't as severe as former strands and we have vaccines available let's try to throw caution to the wind and just not care.
Even when it was bad, and none of us are medical professionals. We know nothing officially about the virus. We do as we're told by the CDC. I still feel like at this point, half of the country, even when it was being said it could be the worst thing to ever come, this is the Black Plague 2.0 when this first started back in March of 2020. People didn't take it seriously then. So it doesn't surprise me the least bit amount that people are trying to find, more and more people are trying to find ways to kind of wriggle their way out of this kind of sooner than maybe they should, maybe they have to, maybe, I don't know. Because, the CDC comes out, we only have to quarantine for 5 days now because Delta asked them to, the airline. So, there's just so many questions. There's no real, there are real answers out there, but there are no true 100%. Everyone's going to believe this and agree with this answers out there. So I just think it's difficult right now to consider all these postponements and cancellations because there's only been 3, out of that 78 game slate, only 3 were missed. I think we're kind of trying to just move past this. And I think that can be good for the country as we learn how we can kind of better maneuver around the virus and keep ourselves protected while allowing us to still carry out our everyday activities such as sports, which are, I think, huge and very important to the American lifestyle and entertainment. And just I think there should be a study done in America on how sports impact the mental health of males around America and how we use that as an outlet for us to try and get out. So when there's these cancellations, and like a couple of years ago when March Madness was canceled, that was hard for a lot of people. So I think we're trying to get as far away from that as possible in order to feel like we're living lives as normally as possible despite everything that's going on. And like we said, this COVID thing, it's been coming in waves. And right now we're kind of either a couple weeks ago or now peaking with the Omicron variant or whatever is going around. So, hopefully we'll start to see those cases fall before March Madness, and then they won't pick back up again until summer so we can get our tournament. But at the same time, depending on how this goes and depending on where the case numbers are at around March Madness, I think as an American public, we should also recognize that depending on how bad this gets, and if it gets worse before then, it would be the most responsible thing. And if it is the most responsible action and would protect the most people, cancellations of sporting events are something that we may have to live with.
Now, Brenden, we've seen a lot of cancellations in the Big Sky Conference, both in the men and women. It seems like we can't get a full Thursday or Saturday slate of games with all these postponements occurring, and it really just takes a hit on, playing consistently. Because you look at this conference and you go, okay, every Thursday and Saturday with a couple of Monday games sprinkled in there. But now it's, okay, you're playing Thursday, but now your Saturday's game's gone. Now you're not playing till the next Thursday or the next Saturday. So not only is this affecting, the rhythm of players and coaches and practice and all that, it's really taking away those precious moments for seniors. And we know the NEU women have a lot of seniors on this team, and that's the majority of their scoring is from those seniors. So, when we look at the Big Sky Conference, should they go about it the rest of the year? Because now it's becoming this red alert scenario where you're not going to be able to postpone these games because you can't just squeeze in 4 games within a span of 7-8 days.
And that's the problem that right now the Big Sky is shoehorning itself into right now. We've seen a ton of cancellations and postponements now that the Big Sky has put out its policies on that. Teams like other conferences, you got to have 7 players and you have to have at least 1 full-time coach. And if you don't make those requirements, then boom, you cannot play. The game has to be postponed. I'll speak from my beat with Northern Arizona. The women team had their outbreak right before the new year. They were able to play a few games over this past week, and now they're in protocol again. Their game for tomorrow got pushed. And the men's team, it's the same thing. They've been in protocol for almost 2 weeks at this point, and we're still waiting. And they're supposed to have a game Monday. We'll have to wait and see if that holds to be true. Yeah, I mean, with the Big Sky, you always have those Thursday games. You always have those Saturday games. All of those games have pretty much been pushed onto Mondays. There are a huge slate of Monday games now, which, for better or worse, that's just how it's going to have to be. I think that, with the policies, games have to be finished before the official end of the league year, so before the tournament. And if you keep pushing games back, I think a few games have been pushed back multiple times, you're going to just simply run out of time, and you're going to get to that point where teams are going to be playing 4 or 5 games in the span of 7 to 10 days. And teams have already gone into that issue. I think one that sticks out that I saw is the University of Idaho. They have a ton of games squished into a short period of time. I'm sure that with how long Northern Arizona men have been off, they're going to be in the same boat. And not only does that affect scheduling, and not only does that affect fan engagement, it affects the players' mental health having to play all those games. Particularly, at some points you're going to have to be playing a long stretch of games on the road. That's going to leave a huge mental health scar on some players, especially with, I know that it applies to us as college students, but the semester just started. So those student athletes are students first and foremost, and they have to deal with the same amount, of homework, same amount of projects, same amount of schooling as any other college student does. And to that, it's a bit unfair knowing that, hey, they have to go on the road and be away from their schooling as long as they have to be, and it's tough. And thankfully there is an infrastructure with online classes that can help them with that, but with the huge ramp up they're going to end up needing to have in order to get all their games in order for schools to hit their bottom line, in order for schools to improve the record in any sort of way, they're going to be squeezing in games until the second half of February, and maybe even the very beginning of March, just before the conference tournament. And by then, once we get to tournament time, these teams are going to be gassed. Teams are going to be you're going to be left not knowing what those pros are going to look like. Maybe they have one of their star players test out and is in protocol in the most critical times coming into conference, and that completely derails their season. There really is no way to avoid that right now, especially if your team has 7 players, they're good. It doesn't matter who those players are. If they have 7 players, you're going to be playing that game. You can't reschedule it. So I think that with the Big Sky and by extension other conferences as well, you're going to need to start scheduling games periodically. What I mean by that is, I think we saw this with, I believe, the Southern Utah woman. They had their Monday game postponed, and they've just pushed it back one day as a way to see, okay, there's probably a good chance that doesn't hold up. There's probably a good chance we have to postpone it again. And maybe they push it another day and another day and another day. They need to use every single day as they can. If they push it, they can't afford to push that game back a week, because you're going to run out of weeks. You're going to have to try and push a game back slowly, death by 1,000 cuts in a certain way, to where, all right, we probably won't make the Tuesday game, but in the event that we do, we were able to get that game done only after one day of postponement. And props to the conference and props to those teams for being able to do that if they can. But really, that is the only way of doing it, right? Hoping and praying that you get those games in, because right now, it's a toss up in terms of whether games will be played at this point.
Let's close out this episode with some lightheartedness. And while I don't have the sound cue for it, it's time for our Fruit Loops of the week, where we list off the worst takes, moments, or events that have taken place in the world of entertainment over the past week. And we are going to begin with Sean Clark.
I don't think you're ready for this one. This will not be NFL. This is soccer. Because this is the most ridiculous thing I have ever seen. Just listen to this. So right now is the Afcon, which is basically Africa's version of the Euro. Just listen to this. I can't even believe this happened. So Tunisia, who was in the 2018 World Cup and even won a game in that World Cup, was taking on Mali. Referee, I apologize if I butchered this guy's name, but Gianni Sikazwe. That is my best attempt at it. Just listen to the events that happened in this match. In the 76th minute, when Molly was up 1-0, VAR rewarded Tunisia a penalty. 1 minute later, this penalty was saved. And then in the 86th minute, this referee blows the full-time whistle in the 86th minute. That is not only exactly. That is not only 4 minutes before even the 90-minute mark, but you also have to have stoppage time too. So then players restarted seconds later. After Tunisia is like, wait, what? Wait, we still need another goal. There's still more time here. 1 minute later, a Mali player gets sent off with a red card. 2 minutes after that red card, the full-time whistle is blown again. In the 89th minute. I'm not done, by the way. I'm not done, by the way. After that whistle was blown, the players were told to return to the pitch after that second full-time whistle was blown in the 89th minute. And Tunisia did not show up. They did not even show back on the pitch because they were so frustrated by this. Because remember, they were down 1-0. They needed to get another goal. But the ref kept blowing the full-time whistle twice before the even 90-minute mark. And to top it all off, the referee was escorted from the field by security. This all happened in a span of 10 minutes.
I think it should be common occurrence now that referees just blow the whistle at like 89-32 now instead of 90 plus whatever extra time is allotted. It's hilarious. It's wrong. It sounds like it was some corruption going on, but honestly, it's pretty hilarious how the full-time whistle got blown not once before the actual full-time was up, but twice, and especially at minute 86 instead of closer to minute 90.
Yeah, there's a reason that was the easy choice for Fruit Loop of the Week. That's just one of the most absurd sports things I've ever seen. I had to read it 3 times to make sure that I was reading it accurately because I couldn't believe it.
Evan.
I wanted to clown the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. How are you so bad all season? You get the first pick in the draft, and then in the final week of the season, you beat an in-division rival who's vying for a playoff spot with Jonathan Taylor at running back and knock them out of the playoffs and shake up the entire AFC playoff picture. So, I don't know. If you're going to be able to beat playoff teams, why haven't you done it all season? And, there's a few answers to that. It's I
think we know the one answer to that, and that comes in the form of Urban Meyer.
Urban Meyer got them off to a disastrously slow start and just incompetent as a team. But the biggest issue I have with the Jaguars from this entire season, and the biggest reason I had them as my Fruit Loop, they took Trevor Lawrence's rookie year from us. It was abysmal. There was no excitement around it. It was more Urban Meyer's drama show and Shad Khan trying to figure out the organization, like juggling, finding or naming an interim coach, and then also uncertainty for the future. We didn't get to focus on Trevor Lawrence as much as we all would have liked of, I'm sure. We didn't get to just enjoy him playing football in the NFL as much as we would have all liked to. So, it's on the Jaguars this offseason to make a real effort to build a team around Trevor Lawrence so we can see and enjoy him the same way we did as fans when he was at Clemson tearing it up. So, the Jaguars, they need to figure out their organization. They've been bad my entire life. They had the most success in their first few years as a franchise, as what's it called when a new team, as an expansion franchise. They had their most success. And then they made the AFC Championship in 2017, and then they self-implode after that. But there's no end to suck for this team. This is worse than the Browns because at least the Browns were good at some point in their history. The Jaguars are atrocious, and they are going to ruin Trevor Lawrence if they don't actually make an effort to build a culture and an organization and a roster around him.
Let's pour one out for Trevor Lawrence's rookie season, shall we? Brenden.
All right. So my Fruit Loop of the week is going to be a team that we've talked about ad nauseum. I think the entire sports world has talked about ad nauseum. And that is the NFL team, the Miami Dolphins. Miami, listen here. What are you doing? If you're getting rid of one of the best, just record aside, you shouldn't put record aside because they had a winning record 2 years in a row. Teams are going to want to have Brian Flores. If you had fired any other coach and Brian Flores was in the market right now, you would be interviewing him, and he would probably be the top candidate. That's why he was your head coach in the first place, because you saw potential in him and you saw him as a guy who can turn your team around. And guess what? He did. Remember the whole tank for Tua, fiasco? What happened? That team last season was supposed to go 0-17. I guess would be what they would be now in this new format. They were supposed to be the worst team in NFL history. They were supposed to be tanking for Tua when Tua was originally going to be the number 1 overall pick. And I guess it kind of maybe worked out for them in their favor. They got their guy who they still believe in, and maybe that's why they got rid of Flores. Maybe there was a rift between him and quarterback. Maybe he thought differently. Maybe he wanted to go a different direction. But that is something you still try and work with. That is, you still try, differences aside, you work with what you have, and that is what Brian Flores did, and he did a damn good job of it. And now you're sitting here right now thinking, who can they get better than Brian Flores? Brian Flores is the number 1 free agent coach right now, and the Dolphins are the one team that can't have him.
Pour one out for the Miami Dolphins not drafting Justin Herbert over Tua Tagovailoa. All right, well, mine branches globally, and I can't tell who's the bigger Fruit Loop because I can't tell who's done a worse job. Novak Djokovic for his absolute selfishness as a human being, or the Australian government being indecisive on what to do. Because last night, while we all thought, oh, Novak's good, he's going to be the top seed, Australia say, you know what? No, we're going to revoke your visa again. And now you got Djokovic's lawyers all getting involved again. And we're only, a couple days from the Australian Open starting. I believe it starts Monday morning for us, or early Sunday morning, or late, whatever it is. We're only a couple days away from the official start of the tennis season. And the number 1 player in the world, Novak Djokovic, Mr. Anti-Vax himself, somehow snuck his way into Australia because, he's one of the greatest to ever do it. Like I said, the golden age of tennis. But again, had this been another player trying to qualify into the Australian Open that was not vaccinated, you bet they wouldn't be in Australia. And so now you've got the citizens of Australia now pretty much starting a whole-on riot to get Novak out. And to be honest, I'm on their side because Novak is staying in the same places where asylum seekers are to get away from COVID-19. And he's just walking around the hallways in the same spot as them. And they essentially can't leave their room because there is a chance that they could walk past Novak at some point who was unvaccinated. Not to mention that Novak tested positive just a month ago. So this has just been an absolute screw job to just put a dark eye on the world of tennis. I always look forward to these Grand Slams. While I'm not the most avid of tennis watchers, the Grand Slams are some of my favorites. The Aussie Open, Wimbledon, French, and U.S. Open, they're all great. But when it starts out like this, especially with a top guy in the world, the guy in Novak, especially when it comes to the Australian Open, we can't have this unfold because it's just an absolute circus, and it affects everyone in tennis, not just you, but the organization that now has to probably reseed everyone within a matter of a couple of days if Novak is really sent home on this second visa cancellation. Guys, just help me out. How can how can we just avoid just drama like this? Maybe not be a selfish human being and just, do your part. Trust me, I've been vaccinated 3 times. I haven't had, outside of being, groggy a couple times, that's really been it for me. I know people are afraid of needles. I am too, but you bet I got those vaccines as quickly as they came because I just do my part and want to make sure that I am as healthy as possible and don't get anyone around me or near me sick. So I don't get why that's so hard for a lot of people to comprehend. Anybody have any final words on Novak before we head out of here?
Why, whenever we hear about tennis, is it always players not doing their job? Either not showing up to appearances, not doing media, not playing in tournaments, or not getting their vaccine so they can open the season at the Australian Open when you're a defending champion. Just do your job. Do your job.
You could say that Novak has really made tennis a joke. That'll do it for this edition of the Rich Report. We appreciate y'all for tuning in, and thank you to Sean, Brenden, and Evan for joining this early in the morning, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. You can check out this stream Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, always beginning at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Check out all of our written content by subscribing to the mailing list on Substack.com. It is free, and, well, we've got playoff weekend ahead, so make sure y'all enjoy that. Have a great weekend, and we will see you back here on Monday to recap it all. And make sure to follow us on social media as well. All of them are tagged there, and they're also tagged on the YouTube description as well. Have a great weekend, and we will see y'all on Monday to recap all of the action.